rather than holding what we have, rather than holding all the knowledge and the awareness and the attitude, skill sets, and habits, I want us to share it with as many people as we can. And that's really what the Master's Path is all about.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back. It is my pleasure and honor to once again get to speak with Mr. John St. James. He is the founder, president, and CEO of JSJ Consulting, founder, CEO, and president of Atlantic Pacific Tang Soo Do Federation, now ninth degree black belt. Again, congratulations on that again, sir. That's a tremendous feat. Also, president, founder, and CEO of the Atlantic Pacific Tang Soo Do Foundation, a nonprofit charity that helps at-risk youth through the martial arts. And finally, last but not least, a best-selling author, author of the most recent book, let me get this right, The Master's Path, How to Intentionally Create More Happiness, Joy, and Fulfillment in Your Life. And sir, I believe you said you even have another second book on the way. So I would love to dive into it. I know your time is short this morning, so I appreciate you giving us this time. And thank you and welcome, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, always a pleasure. Thank you. So yeah, I'm always working on a second book.
Yes, sir. Yes,
It's
sir.
it's called Life, and it'll be the book of life. But yeah, so today we're here, and I want to thank you because
Sir,
without you, there would be no podcast.
it's my pleasure.
My expert interviewer. What we're going to do today is we're going to talk about three things. We're going to talk about the law of expansion. We're going to talk about the law of the ladder, and we're going to talk about the law of the lid. Now, these aren't anything that I came up with, although they're in my book. I talk about each and every one of them, but I give credit where credit's due. Oh my goodness, every single personal development expert I have ever worked with, that ever mentored with, these were foundational skill sets. So the
Yes,
one that
sir.
really stands out, uh, well, of course, was Jim Rohn at the beginning, Darren Hardy along the way, continues to this day, Brian Tracy always. And I would say right now, the one that's had the biggest impact has been John Maxwell.
Yes,
And
sir.
we'll talk a little bit about Mr. Maxwell. He's really Dr. Maxwell is the guy who I first learned the law of the lid from when I read his great book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership.
Yes, yes, sir.
So today I want to start with the law of expansion. And so really, I guess, the first thing I want to share with the group, and then of course, ask any questions you like. When we
Sir.
talk about the law of expansion, we're talking about increasing our capacity, our abilities, so that we can make a larger impact. If I was to show you this, my show and tell today, right?
Yes, sir.
This is a small jar. It's a small Mason's jar.
Yes, sir.
And this is kind of like, all of us when we start out. That's our, all of our knowledge, all of our attitude, all of our skill sets, all of our habits are contained in this little jar. And as we go through life, and I call it the success paradigm, we'll go through that real quickly again. But as we go through life, we start to expand. And as we do, this grows. And so the whole idea between the law, with the law of expansion, is that we want to increase our ability. We want to develop our knowledge, our attitude, our skill sets, and our habits, which in the book is called the success cycle. And
Yes,
we'll
sir.
talk about why that is. But the reason is because, quite frankly, if we're not growing, well, the alternative is we're sliding, or and by the way, it's a cycle. It's a cycle. Let me explain real fast what I mean by that.
Okay.
So if you look at the universe, it's pretty big, right?
Sir.
The universe is expanding. As we speak, it's proven the universe is expanding. Every star out there is expanding until one day that it no longer expands and then it eventually dies. It's called a supernova. Well, we have a life cycle too, each and every one of us. And so our goal on this life cycle is to develop ourselves to our highest level. And so the law of expansion is simply that. Again, I call it the success paradigm. Its first phase is, and that's what we're talking about right now, phase one, is learn and grow. The law of expansion is what I call phase one, learn and grow on the success paradigm. So there's learn and grow, there is share and serve, and there is lead and inspire. So phase one, the law of expansion is simply that. And so what I want us to think about is not just the capacity of our abilities, but if I may, I want us to so again, if we looked at this, that's kind of small. Would you agree?
Sir.
And we could look at our abilities like this, or we could look at our abilities, if you could play along and imagine, we could look at it like a bucket, or we could look at it like a barrel, or we could look at it like a pool, or we could look at it like a lake or a reservoir. Now, each one of those things that I just discussed holds something. It holds something. The thing I really want us to do is get beyond that, and I want us to think about, instead of holding what we have, I want us to think about phase two. And phase two, the share and the serve, is not to hold it, but to share it and serve it. So in this case, I want us to think like a stream, or even better, a river. Rather than holding what we have, rather than holding all the knowledge and the awareness and the attitude, skill sets, and habits, I want us to share it with as many people as we can. And that's really what the Master's Path is all about.
Yes, sir.
Does that make sense?
It does. The river analogy is really interesting because I was thinking at first, okay, there's always the common saying, my cup is full, empty your cup. And I'm thinking, okay, well, law of expansion, are we talking about just making the cup bigger? But now when you say the river, especially with not holding on, but let it go, the river to me is a great analogy because we think of a river as, yes, it's flowing, it's moving, but we always think of it as a thing that is there, that exists, which it does, of course, and it is full, but it is constantly transferring that knowledge. So in the form of its motion. So no, it does. It makes absolute sense. I was going to ask though, in the expansion, so does it kind of lead to that though? If our cup is full, or are we talking about expanding our ability to, even though we are going to pass that knowledge on, expanding our ability to absorb more, to be able to learn and grow more, to then be able to pass on more?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and this is a great. I love the way you just mentioned empty your cup. Of course, wonderful, and we've spoken about it on, I'm sure, one of our past podcasts. I think we've got 7 of them now, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, we were talking about emptying our cup because we all have in our own mind, right? Our own mind, we have our sense of our knowledge and our abilities and our skill sets and our habits. And unfortunately, it's a human being thing. A lot of times the ego gets in the way.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about some of those obstacles in a while. But to answer your question exactly, yes, whether we're talking about developing business skills or developing, you're just yourself, personal growth, developing relationships, developing whatever it is that whatever thing that you would like to do. There's several things we want to think about. And of course, the first one that I share with all of my students, my clients, is that mindset. And that mindset has to be there first. I remember it was, I believe it was Jim Rohn was talking about one time. He said, we all start with a philosophy. We don't start as a child with a philosophy, but as we get older, we have this kind of philosophy. And that philosophy is our mindset. It's our knowledge. And the knowledge kind of shapes how we think about things. And so the very first thing that I like to talk about when I'm talking about developing this law of expansion, being all we can be, making a bigger impact on those that we work with is the biggest room in the world. The biggest room in the world is a room for improvement.
Sure.
No matter what we're doing, it doesn't matter what we're doing, whatever we're doing, we can get better. And if you don't believe me, just take whatever you're doing and go out and find the people that are in the top 1% in your industry, or it could be at your school, or it could be at your restaurant, or it could be at your business, whatever business it is you're in,
Right.
or whatever it is that you do, you find the top 1%, and you will see there is a lot of room for improvement. And it all starts with the mindset, always. Again, I've talked about this in the past. We talk about the Kaizen, it's a Japanese term for constant and never-ending improvement to be the very best we can be. I think Darren Hardy was the one that I first heard. He uses the comment or the phrase X factor of success. The
Sure.
X factor of success is a growth mindset. It's somebody who's thinking about how do I improve? How do I get better? So, first thing I would share with everybody is the biggest room in the world is the room for improvement. The second one is something that as I get older, I start to realize that I've known it all along, but there's an old saying, right? When the student is ready,
Yes, sir.
teacher will appear. We use that with our own students that we teach, right?
Sir.
So, the quality of our thinking, it determines the quality of our life. The quality of our thinking determines the quality of our life. So, if we want to do our best with everything we've already been given, we've got to start with us. We have to develop ourselves. And the quickest way to do that is to start here.
Yeah.
And I think this is probably the one thing after we've developed our knowledge and we're learning and we're growing and we're expanding. Now we need to, as I discussed in the last podcast, we need to apply that knowledge. So this kind of where we get into energy. And so as a martial artist, as a person that trains in the arts, you already know that everything is energy.
Sir.
Everything in the world is everything is energy. This pen is energy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, everything's energy. My thoughts are energy. So knowing that, the first thing we want to think about is, okay, if everything's energy, how do I take that energy to expand my ability so I can make a bigger impact? And there's lots of ways to do this. So I want to talk about some improvement. We're talking about the biggest room in the world.
Yes,
One of
sir.
the first things we do is just focus. We where attention goes, energy flows. If everything is energy and we focus on what we want, if we know what we want, if we're clear about what we want, well, we're going to get there faster. Number one. Number two, we know that if we really want to grow and we focus on what we want, there's a process there. It's not just we have to focus on it, we have to be consistent in how we focus
Yeah.
in on.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We got to be consistent. We've got to be persistent in how we do it. So, I'm there's so many things. We've got to be an observer. We've got to be aware
Yeah.
of what it is that we're trying to do when we think about improving ourselves. And I'll tell you one more thing we need to do. We need to change our thinking, one, because maybe we're not thinking the right way. Maybe we're looking at things with our limited scope. So that's the reason why I feel, finding the right mentor, the right teacher is critically important. No matter what we do, if you can find somebody that is operating at a higher level of thinking, higher level of energy, in effect,
Yes, sir.
they're vibrating. Energy is vibration. If they're vibrating thought at a higher level, this is somebody that we want to study with. So what I like to say to my clients is change your thinking first, but then change your environment. Let me explain.
Yeah.
Because you can change your thinking, but if you're hanging with the wrong group, if you're not in a group that is challenging you to the next level, if you're the smartest kid in the class, right?
Right.
If you're always the smartest one in the group, it's going to limit your growth. And this is the reason why you work with mentors, is you're trying to work with people who will challenge your way of thinking, who are thinking out of the box, who are constant. And this is called the Mastermind Alliance, by the way.
Sure.
It's that goes way back, of course, to the great Andrew Carnegie and Napoleon Hill, who coined the Mastermind Alliance in Think and Grow Rich.
Yes, sir.
Wonderful book.
Well, and I would even submit if you're saying that you're changing your mindset, but you're not changing your environment, you really aren't changing your mindset.
Right.
Because getting back to what you were saying, what you're focusing on is what you're going to embody. It's what you're going to produce. I think of the seek and you shall find. Yes, it's a Bible verse, but the older I get, the more I really do think of that as an action statement. The long, like you said, persistence and consistency. The more I seek, the more I will find. I've also found too that works in the negative.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm always looking for problems, expecting problems, seeing the things that are wrong, I'm gonna find it. But yeah, I am connecting 100% with what you're saying. So I'm curious because you were talking about capacity and growth. How does, because I'm thinking about folks that think, well, I'm already doing everything I can do. I'm so busy. I'm so overloaded. So
Mm-hmm.
how does that growth increase capacity or increase our ability to get beyond that? Maybe what we're doing is actually, we think we're being productive, but it's just busy work. How does that growth increase capacity and get us beyond that to where we can truly grow?
Well, sure. No, it's a great question you're asking. The answer to that is being aware. Again, goes back to being the observer. All
Hmm.
right. I'm going to observe. And how do we observe? We observe ourselves. Are we getting closer to the goal or are we getting further away? Are we tracking our progress? Or are we just hoping that someday we get there? Right? It's kind of like, if I'm driving to California,
Uh-huh.
here I am in Georgia. If I'm driving to California and I don't have a map and I don't have a predetermined way to get there, of course, the old days we used to pull out maps.
Hmm.
Now, of course, we've got GPS.
Hmm.
But, which is very interesting, by the way. I'm going to answer that directly, but before I do, you
Yes,
said
sir.
something that just begs me to say this. When you said, seek and you shall find,
Hmm.
I mean, really, this is an extremely important part of the law of expansion. And
Yes,
what I
sir.
mean by that is your mind, the way your mind is set up, it is trying to always seek the answer. If you ask the right question, number
Sure.
one, and two, you focus.
Yeah.
If you look at what's going on today with AI, that is what AI is. I mean, AI is nothing more than you go in and you key in what you're looking for, whether it be Chat, GPT, or
Hmm.
whatever
Hmm.
particular AI you're using, and it just goes out and does a derivational search all over the world. I mean, it's going to the internet, it's going through the Library of Congress, it's going through every book that's ever been written, it's going through this vast amount of information based on keywords that you've put in there, and it's pulling back out this information. Your mind does exactly the same thing. However, of course, you don't have the resources of the World Wide Web and everything else that's in it. I mean, you
Yes, sir.
do, but it would take a lot
Right.
longer for you to
Right.
do it.
Right.
Now, let's go back to, because by the way, in what I just said is a lot of power.
Yes, sir.
If you are able to ask the right questions,
Yes, sir.
so I want to underline that. Asking the right questions, and it will answer your question. How do you get closer to your goal in a world that is chaotic and, millions of distractions? Well, we just talked about changing your thinking.
Hmm.
So the first thing you need to do is start by asking better questions. The second thing you need to do is, again, align yourself with the right people. There is always going to be obstacles and challenges, always.
Yes, sir.
Life is full of them. Again, I go back to the book, The Master's Path. The reason it is the Master's Path is along the path of life, you are going to hit many roadblocks. Here's the key, though. If you can hook up with the right people who've already walked that path, they've already fallen down, they know where the pitfalls are, they know where the challenges are. Their experience is, you know, there's no money you can put on
Yeah.
being with somebody who's already done it, who says, you know what, let me help you get there faster. Um, Now, having said that, that's one way to do it. We also, another thing I think we need to talk about when we're talking about how do we get there quicker is we need to talk about internal constraints versus external constraints. And
Okay.
we need
How
to,
do you mean?
well, and yeah, I'm glad you're asking because we need to understand the difference. So, external constraints are things that you have no control over. Let me explain. You may be the greatest employee in the world at your given profession and your given company, but if that leader of that company decides to restructure, or if for any reason that company goes bankrupt through no fault of your own, you could lose your job overnight.
Yeah.
That's an external constraint that you have no control over. Okay.
You see?
Now there is a solution to that, but we're not going to get into today talking about being an entrepreneur and being,
You
in
see?
charge of your own business. But what I am going to say is this. Here's another external constraint is the weather. If you're a farmer and you are planting seed and all of a sudden, a deep freeze comes by and freezes everything in the ground, well, that's
Yeah.
unfortunate.
Yeah.
Nothing you can do about it. We could go on and on and on. These are all, your health. Now, you like to say you have control of your health, but even
Yeah.
some of the healthiest people get sick.
Yeah.
So there are some things we don't have control over. However, the internal constraints are the things we do have control over. And the biggest internal constraint we have when it comes to obstacles and challenges, whether it be distractions, whether it be life in the 21st century, is all to do with the way we see things, how we look at things.
Yeah.
And whether we see the negative, like you were talking about, I used to be like that. I mean, I still am. I mean, I'm a human being, right? I mean,
Sure.
I could go, I've been watching, I've been watching black belt tests for 48 years.
Sure.
And I go to a black belt test, and within a split second, I'll see every mistake being made. It's a real curse. It's a real curse. Having said that, at some point, I had to say to myself, "You're going to drive yourself nuts.
Yeah.
This is not the '60s and the early '70s. It's not gun ho, people who are going to class for 2.5, 3 hours at a time, 4 days a week, that will accept punishment because they want to get better quickly. I mean, this is different today. So anyway."
I only chuckle because it's not pleasant on the other side either, sir.
So, let's have fun. Let's have fun on this podcast.
Yes, sir.
So, let me bare my soul. I mean, really,
Hmm.
I mean, I'm one of those people too who, I have to, hey, we all have stinking thinking. That was Zig
Sure.
Ziglar who said that, and I love it. He said, "Do you shower every day?" And most people go, "Yes, I do." Well, why do you do that? Because, I mean, at the end of the day, if you work hard, you're going to stink.
Right.
You need to do that with your brain every day, constantly feeding your brain with positive stuff. And that's why, one of my many mentors, Darren Hardy's always talking about stay away from the news, stay away from what's going on in the world, because those distractions will take you off course.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I would tell you on dealing with internal constraints is not only ask the right questions, but stay focused on the big prize. What is it that you're really working towards? And if you focus on that and ask the right questions. Now, we won't have time on today's call, but let me tell you,
Hmm.
subconsciously, and this, we've talked about it on other calls, subconsciously, we have what's called a terror barrier, right?
Yeah.
The terror barrier for all of our friends. What does that mean? It's, I heard that first from Paul Martinelli, another mentor that I've studied with. But Paul talks about the terror barrier. And what that is it is your self-identity set point. It is your comfort zone. It is just like the thermostat. Your subconscious mind is trying to protect you. So when you are trying to reach your goal, and that's what we're talking about, and you run into an obstacle, whatever that is, most of the time it is your own mind going, whoa, 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 whoa.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
change. It's change. Let's not change things. You
Right.
know, we're
Right.
comfortable where we are. So we need to work on that as well, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And the whole subject really, it just popped in my head. It reminded me of something. This was, had to have been within the first year you and I met that you had said, you were talking about internal, external factors, that there are things we can't control, but we can control how we deal with it. And it reminded me of something you said, and it has always stuck with me. We can either react to something or respond to it.
That's right.
The difference being reaction is that knee jerk, like you said, I lost the job. I'm freaking out, I'm panicking, am I going to pay my bills? Versus responding, okay, I control how I respond to something. And I remember, I'll never forget that. And I don't remember where it was that we were that you had said that, but that always stuck with me. Um, because I was one of those that people were like, well, no, you have full control. I'm like, no, I don't. If the bus hits me, I don't have control over that. But I do have full control over how I respond to it. And that versus reacting to it, that always stuck with me.
But I
Oh,
guess, if
go
I
ahead,
go
sir.
back, I'm sorry. Sorry to interrupt you. Keep going.
Oh, no, no, no. I was just gonna say, I know you're tight on time. I do want to hear the thought that you had, but then I was gonna ask if there was anything you wanted to make sure we got to before we had to go.
So yeah, we're probably going to need to, on the next podcast, we're going to probably need to go through the law of the ladder
Yes, sir.
and the law of the lid, but briefly, very,
Yes,
very
sir.
briefly before we finish today. The law of the ladder, the best way to think about this is, and we'll use the black belt success ladder that you're very familiar with, since you've been on that ladder, and so have I.
Yes, sir.
Whether we were a white belt or we were a yellow belt or an orange belt or green belt or brown belt or red belt or a midnight blue belt or a black belt, we are moving up incrementally through challenges, through obstacles. We're learning new information, we're growing, and then we're sharing, because when we get to a certain level, we're phase two now, we start to share some of the information we have. We're not certified as instructors, but as we become senior, people come to us and ask us, how do you do that technique or whatever.
Right.
Now, the law of the ladder is basically the law of incremental improvement, which basically is, by the inch it's a cinch, and by the yard it's mighty hard. So if you take a goal, whatever the goal is, and you divvy it into small pieces, as you go through the master's path, which again I call the success paradigm, right?
Mhm.
Learn, grow, share, serve, lead, and inspire.
Sure.
The law of the ladder is really phase two. The law of the ladder is phase two of the journey. It's where we are sharing and serving. As we climb this ladder, we are gaining more knowledge, more awareness, self-awareness, situational awareness, heightened awareness. And then at some point, we're actually starting to share with others. Because here's what we know. If we are expanding our ability, if we're improving the way we want to improve, if we're making a bigger impact on those around us,
No.
well, I mean, that's not happening without having some effect on the other person. So the law of the ladder is a beautiful segue into the law of the lid, because the law of the lid, basically, if you take it one more step to phase three, get that right, phase three, that means that we're talking about leading and inspiring.
Yes, sir.
So if we're leading, because we've climbed this ladder, this success ladder, this is the law of incremental improvement, and we start to have a compound effect, right? We start to experience, well, we're getting better, not just at, whatever we're doing, but now we can teach it. We feel comfortable doing it in front of others because we've done it so much. And oh my gosh, I'm making all these, I can now intuitively teach somebody something beyond just physical. using martial arts as I can teach a life skill. Oh, I could even teach lessons in mindfulness. I could teach the philosophy, the history, the tradition, the culture. So here's where I'm going with this. The key to the law of the lid is our leadership ability, our leadership competencies
Mhm.
will determine our level of effectiveness. Let me explain. Here's our leadership ability. Let's call it our business. Let's say our business is graphic design, let's say.
Okay.
And could be anything you want it to be, but it could be a martial arts school, it could be a restaurant, it could be you could be a manager at a corporation, whatever it is. Here it is. Okay. So this is my leadership ability. I'm constantly hitting up against my ability to lead, to set the example, to set the vision, to motivate, to lead others, to delegate. All of these things are going to determine how far I can go. The only way to grow anything is you've got to increase your ability to lead. The law of the lid. So, going back to this,
Yeah.
here's the lid.
Right.
Let's say this is your business. You can't grow beyond your ability to lead. Once you've expanded this, once you've taken that lid off, you have the opportunity, of course, not in this small container. Because of the law expansion, you'd have a
Yes,
bigger
sir.
container,
Yeah.
wouldn't you? Yeah,
So,
you'd have something more like this.
yeah.
So does that make sense what I'm saying?
It makes complete sense, and I'm looking forward to diving into that deeper. Um, I truly do love this stuff because it is, like you said, I think at its core, it's a mindset, and
It
it's
is.
reshaping your mindset to really get the broader, bigger picture. And I know, as you know, as a younger guy, I wondered how are these guys successful, guys and gals, whoever it was, in whatever it was. As human beings, we're all physically made up of the same. How are they? And you start to realize it really is the mindset. They have a different mindset. They have a different way of viewing things. And that limiting factor that you talked about, that leadership for them, they just continually grow that. So, sir, again, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate the time. I'm really looking forward to diving into this deeper because I think there is a tremendous amount of information here that you have to give that really will benefit folks and help them grow and achieve in their own personal success. So, thank you again, sir.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Yes, sir. All right, everyone. Thank you again for joining us. And as Sir said, we will be revisiting and diving deeper into the law of the lid and the law of the ladder, which reminded me the last time we talked about the law of the ladder, I didn't even thought of the base of the ladder, making sure that thing is stable.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And that's a whole other story. So,
And that was based on character. That
yes,
was
sir.
the
Yeah.
character of the individual. Yep.
And this is what I'm talking about. I love this. It's so you could deep dive all of this. Anyway, thank you everybody for joining us. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and we look forward to talking to you again next. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.